Hi friends, welcome to my YouTube channel SS Analysis. First of all, I would like to tell you that if you are watching this video first time, subscribe my channel to see my more upcoming videos on analysis of different commodities and equity indices. And second important thing is to watch this video till its end to understand this solely to take your decision. Your one like will motivate me to be regular in working more hard for you. So let's start the day to analyze the movements of natural gas futures in different time frames. So friends, first of all, I would like to discuss about the technicals of natural gas futures here in a weekly time frame. So friends, here in a weekly time frame, here you can see that how the natural gas futures tested a high during the year 2018 at the levels of $4.933, where the natural gas futures continued to struggle at the important resistance at the levels of $4.638. So friends, here I find that this level seems to be a tough resistance zone for natural gas futures in case of sharp upward move up to these levels, because here I find that the natural gas futures have been repeating the moves of 2018 in 2021. Once again, here you can see that how we have seen first breakout here at the levels of $2.994. So here you can see that how the natural gas futures started the current uptrend from here during the month of May 2021 and finally tested a high at the levels of $4.165 during this month. So friends, here I find that the need of the hour is to take care of the current position of natural gas futures, because so here in a weekly time frame you can see that the natural gas futures have three major psychological resistances. First is at the levels of $3, and the second is at the levels of $4, and the third is at the levels of $5. What we could not cross during the year 2018 and found a sharp reversal from the levels of $4.933. So friends, here you can see that how just below the third psychological resistance at $5, the natural gas futures found the level of $4.933 as a psychological barrier before a psychological resistance. So friends, here I would like to tell you that how the natural gas futures behave when the natural gas futures try to find a breakout above the first psychological resistance at $3. So friends, here I would like to show you this move in a 15-minute time frame. So here in a 15-minute time frame, here you can see that how the natural gas futures behaved when the natural gas futures were trying to breach the psychological resistance at $3 during the month of May 2021. So here you can see that how the natural gas futures tried to sustain above the levels of $3 on May 26, 2021 and tested a high at the levels of $3.015 but could not and found a sharp downward move back up to the levels of $2.975. Once again, an uptrend was there when the natural gas futures tested a high at the levels of $3.046. But from here, the natural gas futures continued to remain under bearish pressure and finally started a sharp downward move on May 27th from the levels of $3.014. And here you can see that how the natural gas futures found a gap down here on May 27th and finally tested a low at the levels of $2.914. So friends, here you can see that how below the first psychological resistance at $3, the natural gas futures behaved before coming above this psychological resistance. So here you can see that how the natural gas futures finally tested a low at the levels of $2.914, and from here an uptrend started when the natural gas futures first time found a breakout above this psychological resistance at $3 on May 28th, when we found a sharp upward move up to the levels of $3.043. And since then, you can see that the natural gas futures try to sustain well above this psychological resistance constantly and finally continued this uptrend. So now I would like to show you the current position of natural gas futures in a 15-minute time frame. So friends, here you can see that how the natural gas futures have been behaving about the second psychological resistance at $4. In the 15-minute time frame here, you can see that how the natural gas futures tried to breach this psychological resistance at $4 from a long time but could not sustain well above this psychological resistance. Here you can see that how the natural gas futures have been trying to sustain above this psychological resistance at $4. since July 22nd, and undoubtedly it tried to sustain above this but could not, and on every upward move the net gas found sharp sell-off from the levels above the psychological resistance at $4. And finally, we have seen the natural gas futures have tested a high at the levels of 4.165 on July 26, but could not sustain there, and its sharp sell-off was there, which resulted in a sharp downward trend, which is still continue during this week. And here you can see that how the natural gas futures finally tested low at the levels of 3.836, and once again tried to test the immediate psychological resistance at $4. But once again, sharp sell-off was there from the levels of 4.021 on July 28th, and here you can see that how the natural gas futures continued to sustain above this psychological resistance at $4 but could not, and finally started to move downward on July 29th from the levels of 4.096. So here you can see that how the natural gas futures continued to move downward and tested a low at the levels of 3.856 on last Friday. So here you can see that how this level seems to be a quite supportive level for natural gas futures, because below this level bullish flag is there in a daily time frame, which I will show you within next few minutes. So friends, here you can see that how the natural gas futures found a steep downward move on July 30th. You can see that how the natural gas futures continue to find stiff resistance at the levels of 3.993, well below this psychological resistance at $4 on last Friday, and continued to move downward and found a sharp downward move when the natural gas futures finally tested low at the levels of 3.856. But here the natural gas futures found some reversal and finally closed the week at the levels of 3.915. So friends, here you can see that how this move looks very similar to the move during the month of May 2021, when the natural gas futures started to move upward from the levels of 2.914 when it was trading well below the psychological resistance at $3, and finally started an uptrend from here. So here you can see that how this uptrend in natural gas futures started from the levels of 2.933. Therefore, I find that the levels of 2.933 was a quite decisive level for natural gas futures below the psychological resistance at $3, when the natural gas futures tested a high at the levels of 3.042. And since then, we can see that the natural gas futures have been maintaining this uptrend. So friends, here you can see that how the natural gas futures have finally closed at a very decisive point at the levels of 3.915, just below the psychological resistance at $4. So friends, here I find that the opening on the first trading session of the upcoming week could be very decisive if the natural gas futures start the upcoming week with a gap down opening below the levels of the 3.915. We'll see the natural gas futures could try to breach this immediate resistance at $3.933, which is a very decisive point here. So friends, here I find that the levels of the 3.933 could be a decisive point for natural gas futures, because here I find that if the natural gas futures start the upcoming week well below this level, we'll see this downward pressure to continue, where the immediate support for natural gas futures could be at the levels of 3.856. But if the natural gas futures are not able to hold above this immediate support, we'll see this downward trend to continue. But on the other hand, if the natural gas futures find a gap up opening well above the levels of 3.963, we'll see the natural gas futures could try to sustain above the psychological resistance at $4, where I find that if the natural gas futures successfully sustain above the levels of 4.060, we'll see this uptrend to continue, where the immediate resistance for natural gas futures could be at the levels of 4.097, and the next resistance will be at the levels of 4.157. So friends, here I find that the next week could be very decisive for natural gas futures, because currently we have closed the last week at a very critical juncture, but now I find that we are still in summer and exports are strong and production is low. Estimates this week showed that LNG production is around 91 billion cubic feet, which is below the recent highs and well below the pre-pandemic levels. So friends, here I find that the weather pattern could be very supportive for natural gas futures, but here I find that the storage level will be very important. So friends, here you can see that the natural gas inventories have been witnessing a decreasing injection level from a long time. Here you can see that how in May 2021 the injection level was of 115 billion cubic feet, whereas the forecast was for 104 billion cubic feet. But since then, we have seen this level of injection just at the levels of 36 billion cubic feet during the last week, and I find that on August 5th, this could be much lower than this week. So this could be very supportive for natural gas futures. So friends, here once again, let us have a look at the movements of natural gas futures in a weekly time frame. So friends, here you can see that how the natural gas futures have found a breakout above this bullish flag during the last week, when we found this breakout above the psychological resistance at $4. And finally, the natural gas futures tested a high at the level of $4.164 during the last week, but could not sustain there and found some profit booking from these highs. And finally, here you can see that still the natural gas futures have been facing stiff resistance above the levels of $4. So friends, here I find that if the natural gas futures start the upcoming week above the levels of $3.933, we will see the natural gas futures will try to sustain above the psychological resistance at $4 and a breakout above the next resistance at $4.120 could push the natural gas futures above the levels of the 4.2, and whereas my final target for the natural gas futures could be at the levels of the 4.4. Friends, here you can see that how I have marked some important points from where the natural gas futures started its uptrend. First is at the levels of the 2.4, when the natural gas futures started the current uptrend during the month of March 2021 and continued this uptrend up to the levels of the 3.4. So this was a $1 move. So once again, I find that the natural gas futures could give a $1 move from the levels of the 3.4 up to the 4.4. So this could be the psychological target for natural gas futures. Friends, here I find that the natural gas futures could test the levels of the 4.4 during the upcoming week because the exports are strong and the production is low. So friends, now let us check this move in a daily time frame. So friends, here in a daily time frame where you can see that how the natural gas futures have been maintaining current uptrend from the levels of the 2.454 what they tested on April 6, 2021, and since then we have seen this uptrend to continue where the natural gas futures found some resistance at the levels of the 3.363, from where the natural gas futures found a downward move back up to the levels of the 3.138, and since then we have seen the natural gas futures continue to move upward and tested a high at the levels of the 4.190 on July 26th. But from here you can see that the natural gas futures have been facing stiff resistance at the levels of the 4.120 in a daily time frame. So friends, here I find that after a bullish consolidation amid this bullish flag, natural gas futures have resumed enough strength to sustain well above the levels of the 3.991. Friends, here you can see that how the natural gas futures found a sharp recovery from the levels of the 3.857. So friends, here I find that if the natural gas futures start the upcoming week well above the levels of the 3.948, we'll see the natural gas futures could try to sustain above the psychological resistance at $4, where the bulls could try to breach the immediate resistance at $4.120, and the next target for the bulls could be at the $4.237. Undoubtedly, we could find some sell-off from here, but overall trend could remain bullish. If the natural gas futures find a sustained move well above the levels of $4.276, we'll see this uptrend to continue up to the levels of $4.444 during the upcoming weeks. So thank you friends, thanks for watching this video. If you like this video, don't forget to share this video with your more and more friends. Thank you.